we're going to a different economy, and we're going to be learning more about that as we go. But clearly, we're learning that things can be done from remote locations. We're learning that technology can replace people even more than we thought.
We're not going back to the same economy. We're recovering, but to a different economy, and it'll be one that is more leveraged to technology. And I worry that that is going to make it even more difficult than it was for many workers.
In Silicon Valley, and my friends who work in technology know that what we did to the manufacturing workers, we are now going to do to the retail workers, the call center workers, the fast food workers, the truck drivers, and then even bookkeepers, accountants, insurance agents, lawyers, and on through the economy. So what happened to the manufacturing workers is a very clear sign.
This effort, and China has big plans for this. They intend to seed their digital yuan into the global environment by giving it away to visitors at next winter's Olympics. When they arrive at the airport, they're going to get yuan digital wallets. They're going to receive digital yuan. They're going to use it throughout their visits to Beijing, and then they're going to take it back to their home countries. They see this as a huge advantage. Why? Because who controls the underlying protocols, who controls the underlying standards of the future of money will control the future of money.
Dr. von Braun was at Fairchild his last 4 or 5 years of his life, and he was working on educational and communication satellites. And a little later we're going to show a part of that, and I'll explain that. But I was with him at his office one day, and he said, you want to go hear a lecture? I said, sure. So we went over to Johns Hopkins Applied Research Lab, and he gave a great lecture on educational and communication satellites because that's what he was working on. And then right at the end, someone asked, what about Mars? Are we ever going to Mars? So he lit up. Remember now, this is 75, just a year and a half before he died, so he was getting a little feeble at that time. But he did light up, and we're going to take a look at it here in just a minute, and see, you'll get to hear Dr. von Braun's personal response to what about Mars. He just happened to have some stuff with him, so I think he kept it with him. But that was certainly.
Well, I think the next target for men, other than activities, of course, in low Earth orbit, of which there would be many, will probably be Mars. We have learned a great deal about the planet Mars during the last 2 years, particularly through Mariner 9, which mapped the planet Mars thoroughly and discovered a few geological phenomena on Mars that nobody had expected. For example, Mars has the highest volcano in the world, in the known solar system. That volcano is 16 miles high and has about a total volume twice as much as the largest volcano on Earth, which is the big island of Hawaii, which when measured from the bottom of the ocean is, I believe, only 11 miles high. So this is twice as big, twice as voluminous. And also there's every indication that it was active in a relatively recent geological period, just judging from the very few meteoric impacts on the crater rim. Now, another discovery made by Mariner 9 was a canyon on Mars. Imagine Grand Canyon stretching all the way from Miami to Seattle, twice as deep and twice as wide. That is a canyon that was detected on Mars. So this too seems to show that Mars is by no means a geologically dormant or dead planet, but apparently quite active. Now there's of course always a question of lack of water on Mars. There's no doubt about the fact that Mars by and large is pretty arid. But the combination of volcanic heat and of course also water vapor exuded by volcanic eruptions makes it entirely possible that there are oases on Mars where the environment is quite different from the average. You wouldn't expect by looking at the Sahara Desert that there could be oases with palm trees, for instance. And it is for this reason that many people believe that the likelihood of finding even some not very higher forms of life, but at least some higher forms of vegetation on Mars is quite good. Now, I think needless to say, if we do find evidence of life on Mars, the rush will be on again, and man probably wants to follow unmanned exploration. The first two Mars soft landers, unmanned, will be launched later this year and are scheduled to soft land on Mars in the summer of 1976, next year. So about a year and a half from now, we will be able to answer the question far more succinctly whether man will probably go to Mars. It's
been now almost half a century since humans were last on the moon. It's too long. We need to get back there and have a permanent base on the moon. I think like a big permanently occupied base on the moon, and then build a city on Mars and become a spacefaring, like a spacefaring civilization, a multi-planet species. We don't want to be one of those single-planet species. We want to be a multi-planet species.
To move off Earth while we have the opportunity. Everything we know is right here.
And just because it's not just one of the other criticisms. Sometimes feels like, oh, is this some escape hatch for rich people? No, they think it's like so. Going to Mars reads like that ad for Shackleton going to the Antarctic. It's dangerous. It's uncomfortable. It's a long journey. You might not, come back alive. But it's a glorious adventure, and it'll be amazing, an amazing experience.
And your name will go in history.
Yes, you might die. It's going to be uncomfortable, and you probably won't have good food, and all these things, So if an arduous and dangerous journey where you may not come back alive, but it's a glorious adventure, sounds appealing.
And
Mars is the place.
And you still have thousands of volunteers, if not millions of volunteers, who would want to go.
I mean, honestly, a bunch of people probably will die in the beginning. It's tough sledding over there.
We're an exploring species.
Yeah, exactly. Not for everybody. We don't want to make anyone go, so it's it's volunteers only.
Welcome to the Crypto Teacher. And guys, I come back with that video just to make you think. Now, guys, all we hear about is Elon Musk talking about Mars. Jeff Bezos, the moon, Mars. Remember, these are the same missions for the Nazis. And remember Operation Paperclip. Do not ever forget it. Remember, John F. Kennedy said, no, they're not coming in here. And we know what happened. Now, von Braun also talked about Mars a lot. Now, he says the question is, do they have water? Now, guys, we know that planet is called Mars. And MAR stands for water. We know this maritime, marine life. There is a bigger hidden agenda when it comes to the mission for Mars. And unfortunately, guys, we have so many young people who believe in Elon Musk and hasn't done any type of research whatsoever. We know he's part of the New World Order. And we also know they hide things in plain sight. Because when it comes to the New World Order, it's all planned out. Y'all have a wonderful day.
Paperclip, author and journalist Annie Jacobson joins us now. Welcome to you.
Thank you.
So these were top scientists in the German war effort, sought out by the U.S. military as the war was coming to an end.
That's right. These were Hitler's top weapons makers, and Operation Paperclip became a classified military program to bring them to the United States. It also had a public face, so there was, on the one hand, the truth about the program kept secret, and on the other hand, the idea that we'll tell the public that these are the good Germans.
And the good Germans, but they were dedicated Nazis, the ones you write about. We should say there are many, 1,600 in all, right?
Yes.
You document about 21 of them, dedicated Nazis, some, as I said, involved in horrific stuff. What they did was known, right, to the people to the Americans who were seeking them out.
Certainly to the American military intelligence officers who were interviewing them. The idea that they were involved in war crimes was really necessary to be kept secret, and that's exactly what happened. And so in the book, I think I unveil a lot of the truth about this program that has remained clouded for decades.
So give us an example of one of the figures that intrigued you.
Well, I think one of the worst case scenarios was that the United States military made the decision to bring Walter Schreiber. This was Major General Dr. Walter Schreiber, the Surgeon General of the Third Reich. He wound up at a military facility in Texas.
And doing what?
Well, during the war, Dr. Schreiber had been involved in the vaccine program for the Reich, which sounds like a nice program, but it was actually a program to work on protecting German soldiers from these biological weapons that were also being manufactured. So he was involved in war crimes and concentration camps. He became a prisoner of the Soviets and then defected to the United States. We saw him as someone who we absolutely wanted here for his knowledge. So in the United States, it still remains unknown what exactly he did, only that he worked for the U.S. Air Force in Texas.
You know, this becomes, of course, a story of practical versus ethical choices, right? Decisions made whether to look the other way or forget about the past in order to advance and gain advantage over the Soviets, it should be said, during the Cold War.
Absolutely. I mean, the Cold War got hot very quickly, and the Soviet threat was this foreboding menace. And the idea was, certainly at the Pentagon and among the Joint Chiefs of Staff who were really running this program, was if we don't get these Nazi scientists, surely the Soviets will.
Was there much debate at the time about the ethics of it?
Absolutely, there was a debate, and I think that's what makes the narrative so compelling, because you have some people, including high-ranking generals at the Pentagon, who are loath to work with Hitler's former scientists. And you have others who say, this must be done, and it will be done.
You said we don't really know much about the case of Walter Schreiber, what he did. Some of them we do know, right? And the very famous cases, most famous, is Wernher von Braun.
Yes, he came here. He was the head of our rocket program and brought 114 fellow V2 rocket makers with him. And this program, again, had a very beneficent face. Only now do we know the facts are very different about what those scientists were involved in at the end of the war in what was called the Nordhausen slave labor factory. Deep in the tunnels, you had concentration camp prisoners building the V2 rockets.
So in a case like that and others where we know that they did accomplish things for the U.S. when they came here, then the question, and you write this, does accomplishment cancel out past crimes?
That, I think, is the conundrum of Operation Paperclip. And I hope that people come to their own conclusion about that, because certainly the idea that you would excuse some of this horrific behavior during the war becomes, that big moral question.
And what happened to these guys in the end? A number of them just lived out their days quite well here in the U.S.
You know, the obituary for Dr. Theodore Benziger in the New York Times, I think, kind of sums it up. He died in 1999, and the New York Times lauds him as a good German scientist who's dedicated his life to the U.S. military. It leaves out the fact that he worked with Himmler very closely during the war and was actually on the original list of Nuremberg war crimes trials. And yet, he was released into U.S. custody and came to the United States. So this idea that you can just whitewash someone's past, I think, is important